I'm John Hanig, Ben Sales Director. This is Tom Jensen, our Service Manager. Today we're going to go over how to rebuild our gear motors. So whether it be a 110 volt or 220 volt gear motor, the gear case is the same, it's identical. So we're going to take this apart and show you how to replace the gears in there. To show you to start with, Tom, you want to hook it up and we'll show them. So right now Tom's hooking up the leads just so that we can test this motor, which is what you're probably going to do in your shop to make sure if it's working or not. Make sure all the wires are separated so we don't have a short. Everything's good to go. We'll power it up. You can hear that the gear motor is running, and actually right now you can see the shaft is turning. We can put a screwdriver in that hole and actually hold it. So the gears are obviously stripped or something's wrong inside here that we're going to get to. Now we're going to remove these outer bolts on the gear case so that we can get the two separated. Okay, now that we've got the bolts out, we're going to go ahead and pull the gear motor part off of the gear case. So just give it a few raps with the hammer to loosen it up. You can see it's coming apart. So after inspection, it kind of threw us a bit. The teeth were all in fact good in this gear motor. However, this press fit has given up. So something evidently locked the motor up, the output, and it was still trying to turn, so loosen that up. So here is the culprit on this one. It happens to be a bad gear. So now that we found our problem, we also know that it's a part, want to inspect all the bushings to make sure they're in fact in good shape or they need to be replaced. Yep. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. You can either take a pin or a drill bit that just fits the hole, or actually stick the gear back in there that came out and make sure that there's no excessive wobble, which this one does seem pretty tight. So then we'd also then want to check the opposite end into the bushing where it goes. And again, there's no movement there, so that bushing is good.
You just put a little grease in there.
So to get these bushings out, we're going to basically remove them hydraulically is what they call it. So we're going to fill the cavity with grease, and then we're going to take a transfer punch or a drill bit that goes in 64ths would do the same thing, but get one that just fits the bushing hole. And again, if it's war, you may have to go slightly oversized, but just so that it fits. You start that down in the hole, and then we're going to tap on the top of that punch with a hammer. It'll force the grease down under that bushing and bring the bushing up so you can be replaced. See the bushing come up? So you can see here he's got it full of grease. The bushing has started to come up. As he hits it, you can see it pop the bushing up out of the hole. This would be the same for all the bushings that we're going to replace here. So just fill them with grease, take a punch that just fits the bore. Again, when you got it full of grease, set your punch on top of it, tap it down with a hammer. As that grease goes down, it brings the bushing up. So the bushings that can be removed, like I just mentioned with grease, where it's a blind hole, this bushing would be the exception to that. So if we flip it over, we got to get a pin that will just go down through it, a shaft, to catch this shoulder and tap it out. So there's an O-ring in there, so you have to get down past the O-ring. Couple hits with the hammer. So as you can see, that removed that bushing. So now we just grab a new bushing, we flip it over, press the new one back in. So here we're going to replace the bushing that we removed earlier. Tap it down into place and you're good to go. So I would advise replacing all the bushings when you do a gear set. That way, so to say, you have a new motor. If you try to cut corners and replace one or two that you think is bad and the others may or may not be, it in fact could be, and eventually it's going to go and you have to do it again. So while you got it apart, for no longer than it takes, for as cheap as it is to do, I'd replace all the bushings. So right now I'm just applying a light layer of grease on the shafts where it's going to go down into the bushing. We'll also put some in the bushing holes before we install this.
You do that on all the gears?
Do it on all the gears or anything that's going into bushing. That way you know they've been greased. So now I'm putting grease down in the holes just enough so that if you fill it again, we're going to have that same reaction. So you just want to make sure and get a coating on it. I've already done the shafts, so we're just doing this. It also helps assembly just slide together a little easier. Now we're going to start going back together. We're going to put the shaft in through the number 1 gear. Set the gear down in the gear case. Again, you can see we had a nice amount of grease in there. It pushed it out the other side. We're going to go ahead and grease that shaft because it goes in through a bushing. And we'll start assembling the gears. Okay, we're going to assemble the gears. Now we'll grab the next gear, the little one. And you can see that one kind of floated up a little bit because the grease is holding it, so we want to make sure we get it down where it belongs. Make sure everything turns freely, which it does. You can see this larger one is rotating. And then we're going to take the top, the electrical part, and put it back over the top of it and get it completed. So now that we got all the gears in, we want to put a bead of silicone. So now that we've got the gasketing complete, we're going to go ahead and take the electrical side and match up with the gear side. So just a few taps, just making sure everything lines up. If the shaft does in fact go into all the bushings, get it pressed together. Now we're going to hook it back up and test run it and make sure what we've done in fact works. So now we're going to go ahead and just test run it and power on. Make sure everything's all seated together, which it is. So now we'll install our bolts.
This will be like a floating gimbal shaft. Look at this. What a gimbal is?
Yeah. So again, don't over tighten these. We're just going to go down to where it just barely ratchets. Then we're going to use an end wrench to finish it. So now we've powered it back up. Shaft is rotating, which it was earlier, but we stuck a screwdriver in. You could actually turn the shaft freely. And now you cannot hold it back. So we know everything is working like it's supposed to. Gears are in great shape. We put new bushings in. So now that we've got it back together, we've got it all wiped off and clean. We've gone ahead and put our bolts in here so that it's ready for install.